What a fool. All right. Good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, good night. Whatever time you're watching this, as always, thanks for watching Common Sense Fishing. So tonight's live stream, we're going to be doing some tips, tricks. We're going to use the whiteboard on breaking them down. And then any comments or questions you guys have, we can also use the whiteboard to illustrate to kind of help make a point about what I'm doing. Hey, how's it going, the Bass Assassin? So let's see here. First tip I want to talk about in the summertime is that sometimes these fish are deep. Right? So sometimes in the summertime, these fish can be down 30 to 50, 60 feet deep. They can also be up here shallow. They can be offshore. They can be all over the dang place. But usually if it gets super, super hot, hey, how's it going? They're going to be down here a lot of the time if they're not up here. They're not top water and they're not shallow to offshore, mid and late summer especially, then look for them down here. Okay. So one thing when fishing deep, whether it be the summer or the winter, we're going to get a couple of deep fishing tips out of the way. Okay. When you're taking and you're sitting in your boat and you're casting up to shore, one thing you got to consider is the buoyancy and how water works. So when you lift your lure up and you lift your pole, that pulls your bait more than you think. So you get a hop. Then when you do the same thing, you get another hop. Then you get another one. So when working your bait down, sometimes it's mindful to remember that even in the summertime, you might have to fish a little slow to keep your bait with making contact with the bottom when the fish are like that, when it gets real hot, because the bottom earth temperature is about 56 degrees. So if the water is 80 plus, 70 plus, and then say 60 plus, the earth is cooler, right? So sometimes the fish will sit down here near the bottom in the summertime, and you might have to fish a little deep. That's if, so I don't like to fish this way. I'll prefer to jig fish up shallow, crank bait up in this range right here, and then offshore fish. And look for them with my fish finder, top water fish, stuff like that. But if that's not working, believe you me, they're in that 30 to 60 foot range. And when you fish like that, remember that a lot of the reason the fish are down there is the temperature, oxygen, bait, stuff like that. So sometimes when you're fishing, you got to remember and remind yourself, even in the summertime, to slow down a bit. Fish a little slower. Don't quite give your baits as big a hops. Sometimes that's the key. If the fish are really aggressive, they'll tell you. The fish are smashing it hard, you're getting bit a lot, you can pop it and get hit. Sometimes you think there's not a lot of fish there, but they're there. You're just bouncing right over them as they're down here, right up against the shore. You're sailing over them and only in the strike zone for a short period of time out the whole thing, instead of being in the strike zone the whole way down. Because then you can give your bait, you can put some tips for in the summertime. If you want to not fish so dang slow and finesse, some tips I can give you are put some rattles in your bait and fish with trailers on your jigs, right? And fish with bigger Texas rig worms and stuff like that. And then what you can do is When you're working your bait down the hill, you can pause for a second and just rapidly shake your bait and get an erratic motion to draw a fish to that. You can also pop it every once in a while to just try to kind of figure them out. But remember, a lot of the time, especially in these mother lode lakes, because the shoreline's real deep, that when you lift your rod tip, you're getting much more movement out of your bait than you realize. So fish slower, even in the summer. And a way that you can do it and kind of still fish fast is instead of taking your rod tip and making big lifting gestures with it like this, take your rod tip and give it tiny, little tiny pops and give it 2 or 3. So what that's going to translate to, let's show you what this is going to translate to. So the traditional kind of lazy, like do on bottom bouncing is, right? Kind of relaxed in the hand at almost a 25, 30-degree angle, something like that. Then lifting it to like almost straight up and down or very close, right? That's what you're doing. When you're doing that, you're lifting your bait more than you realize. Now, if you want to fish kind of faster, you're not trying to fish like it's wintertime, but you want to get more bites. Again, in the summer, I start up shallow and work your way deep, see what your fish finder tells you. But what I do is I put my rod tip out, right? My bait sinks, and a little pop, right? And it falls, doom, doom. And then what I'll do is I'll give my pole little pops, just like that. And I'll do it like 2 or 3 times. So just, and what that's doing is my bait's now just going, and it's staying in the strike zone, and I can get it to make small little hops and kind of move quickly along the bottom in that strike zone if that's where the fish are at. So if you don't have a fish finder, one thing you can do is you got to rule them out, right? Where are they? So if you don't have a fish finder or you're not great at using them, the first way is start shallow and move down. And when you're doing it, fish slow rather than fast. And if that's not working, or you can start the opposite direction too. You can get up with your boat, get parallel, and fish shallow, and then move out and fish mid, like this. We'll say a square bill out over open water, square bill over open water, maybe a medium diver, a Kitech, a spinner bait, something like that. A little deeper, same thing. Kind of this can be kind of used out here as well. You want to get a little deeper, so you got that deep diving crankbait that you can use out up close to shore, all the way offshore a little bit, as long as you're not too far from the bottom, right? And then when you start getting out here, you're usually bottom bouncing down into this range, right? So you can start power fishing, throw jigs up here down into your 25, 30-foot range. You can throw your crankbaits, your top water, whatever have you. And then when this kind of fishing isn't working, then slow down, look out here, take your time, fish slower. And you can also fish up closer. And remember to keep your eyes peeled for any activity. Summertime, the water temps are higher, the bass's metabolism are higher, they're more active, they should be easier to spot. And almost any given time on the lake, there should be some feeding fish somewhere, right? So that doesn't mean they're always hitting top water, but a lot of the times they'll give you some signs. You can throw top water all day, you can do stuff like that. So, hey, Ray, nice to see you on. We're going to do some whiteboard videos tonight. I'm going to be on for a short time doing some tips, breaking down a couple of different techniques. And we're going to share some kind of little top secret techniques with you guys and gals tonight. So smash that like button, share the video if you get a chance, leave a comment, let other people know how you think the video is going. And thanks for hanging out tonight. So, hey, Mike. So I'm going to talk about a little known secret that I don't think anyone likes to talk about in the fishing world. And I don't care what type of fishing you're doing, there's a way to do this with almost all types of fishing. And that is traditionally when fishing like a shoreline, um, let's just use it topographically. The bass boat pulls up. So instead of this being the top of the water, don't worry about this. This is just a shoreline, let's say. So typically, one of two things is going to happen. The back boat is going to pull up, and it might fish parallel if they're power fishing. If they're top water fishing, if they're crankbaiting, spinner baiting, they're going to fish like this, right? They're basically going to cruise the shoreline and cover this kind of area like this, right? That's your power fisherman usually. That's your guy throwing the spinner baits, the crank baits. That's the guy that's fishing parallel. That's how I like to fish a lot of the time. But you can fish all kinds of different ways. Then you've got the guys who are backed off a bit and they're fishing at the shore. And those are usually your bottom bouncing fishermen. Those are usually your bait fishermen. And then they move, I mean, not bait, but bottom bouncing, jig, rubbers, stuff like that. And they fish like this. And then they keep moving and they cover the shore from the shore back to the boat, right? And sometimes they'll be really far away, right? And then sometimes you'll see them on points, right? You'll see them on main lake points. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. You'll see like a main lake point, and you'll see a boat. They'll either be like this, and they'll be fishing the main lake point kind of like this, right? That's your usual traditional way. And occasionally, you'll see the guy that's either sitting one of three ways, like this, or he'll be sitting, the same type of fisherman will then pull his boat up right here like this, and also depending on the time of year, and cast out like this, especially if this point extends farther out. And if I was using a topographical map, went down, then he could park himself right there, fish all of this point. And then what he's doing this way, though, is bringing the bait from deep up. We're going to show you a representation of that. Now, you'll see guys doing this a lot, right? But you won't see them usually doing it on a normal spot. So here's the lake. You won't see them usually right up against shore. This is for power fishing. If you're bottom bouncing, you're pissed off. You don't have any room. Now, what you do is you cast out and you bring the lure up towards the boat, right? And what that does is you keep the boat in as shallow of water as you can, 10 feet or less, where your boat's in a foot to 3 or 4 feet, and the edge of your boat isn't more than so many feet down. Then you're casting into anywhere from, could be 50 to 70, could be realistically 25 to 45 or something. That's probably going to be your more realistic target if you're fishing deep in the summer and you're fishing this way. You cast out into that, and then you work it all the way back up to that 5 to 10 range, right? And I'm going to show you what that looks like. This is one of the little hidden tips that a lot of guys I don't think like to share. And I've got a couple of really good buddies that are great at fishing that they fish like that a lot. There's some challenges. I'll talk to you about it, but you're going to catch a lot more fish. And if you swim bait fish, same thing. If you pull yourself up to shore and you run your swim bait as close to shore as possible, then you're going to get it pinned. Also, the other thing is if you're trying to work a couple different water columns, you can cast it out deep to shallow and pull fish up, And the thing is your bait will be in contact with the bottom almost the whole time. It's an easy way to get snagged. However, it's the easiest way to trigger a feeding response from a fish, and we're going to talk about that right here. So say we got our bottom like this, right? And here we got the surface, and we put our boat as shallow as we can. So we're sitting, right here. We're sitting right here up in our boat. It's facing this way. That's why you don't see it long. It's going this way. Let's see the motor's right here, right? And we're up here fishing out, right? And our bait goes down. So here's the thing, is if there's anything suspended out here, you can throw spinner baits, you can throw top water, you can throw underspins, you can throw deep diving cranks, medium diving cranks, whatever, and cover out here. You can throw bottom bouncers and cover down here if you're fishing deep, right? But here's the real trick. This is the kicker. This is where this works out. You cover all this water, right? But here's the thing that fishing like this does that no other type of fishing does, and I'll show you why. And it creates, in my opinion, and a lot of my friends' opinion, it creates a feeding response that you may not have otherwise gotten out of a fish if you were fishing the other way around. So, hey, thanks for jumping on, J Rod. Appreciate it. So we're going to show you what I'm talking about. So you put your boat shallow, you cast out into, let's say, 45, 35. You're working your bait, and you pull it up into this, and it's almost like a snag. You got to shake it, wiggle it, pull it up, bounce it. It might start to fall back down, pull it up, bounce it, not sitting there. Doom, doom. Oh, almost snagged again. Got to mess with it, right? Your line's down here. You're pulling it up. And then once you get right here, you lift your tip. You might get a big bounce out of it. But as soon as you get here, as soon as you pull forward, you're pulling back into a rock. It drops, falls up, up, up and around. Doom. Maybe you get another lift out of it. Boom. And it starts to thumb. And you pull it up, almost like a snag. You pop it up, right? And then if you work it right, you hop it or crawl it, and then your next thing, what's going to happen is, here's the deal, is when you're going this way, your bait will be in contact with the bottom like 90+% of the time. And any fish that is anywhere in here will see that. And here's the problem for the bait. Here's the thing about what happens with the fish. The fish sees that lure, sees that bait, and that bait is pinned against this hard surface, against this structure, against the ground. The bait has nowhere really to go other than it can try to go left or right. This is a 2D representation, but the bass can come down. Now the bass sees that. The bass can pin it and attack it, eat it, less energy and more of a successful strike. While if the bass is either out here, right, and it's looking, and your bait's flying around and popping and hitting, there's more movement out of the bait. The bass could decide that it wants to eat it right now and start moving, and you can pop it out the way. Then that bass could look and say, you know what? I don't want to eat that right now. Or looking down at the bait, the bass sees something that is moving more, that has got more distance between the shore and it, so it's clearing more distance. Whatever it is moving, it can swim more, has more of a likelihood in the fish's mind of being able to escape, more energy spent trying to attack that bait. Bass is less likely to attack the bait if it's coming downhill. If the bait is coming uphill, the bass is much more likely to pin the bait. And for those that swim bait fish, they'll tell you, you have to get your bait up against the shore and rocks. You have to bump against stuff. You have to make the swim bait look injured, pinned, no way out for it. And it triggers a bite that may not have otherwise happened.